So I'll be speaking English. Obviously, Miroslav will translate as well for you at various points, but just so you can kind of keep up with what I'm saying. I'll also try and speak sort of fairly slowly, so I'm not trying to be insulting or anything. As Miroslav, so I'm Keith Deeney. I'm from Address, which is a sister company to AV Studios. I'm a senior BIM consultant there. Really, just a sort of quick bit about me. So I studied in architecture, been in the architectural field for sort of 10 years or so, and then I've been with Address now for 2 years. So I trained as an architect and worked on kind of BIM projects before it was kind of BIM really, and sort of rolled it out in large-scale projects and differing schemes, and then obviously worked for smaller practices as well. Currently,
I will translate. Keith představil sám sebe, působí.
Můžu pokračovat.
Působí ve společnosti Adris a 2 roky předtím 10 let pracoval v architektonických projekčních firmách, studoval architekturu a v podstatě už ve své praxi se věnoval problematice. I will be always shorter than you.
Okay, good. I now work alongside part of our government task group, sort of involved in universities and so on, and also they help create some of the national standards that we've got in England, and some of the members of that task group as well.
Působí společně s BIM Task Group, což je vládní organizace, která má v Velké Británii na starost standardů a dokumentace týkající se problematiky BIM.
So as I say, I'm with Address now for 2 years. Address is a company established in 1982, so they've been around for a long time. And initially they were sort of involved in Autodesk CAD-based kind of products. They also worked a lot in kind of manufacturing, that kind of field, before they got sort of involved in architecture. Now realistically we try and sort of, or part of my role really is to try and do professional services and consulting, as well as IT and hardware as well. So the idea being that we're sort of helping people in the process of things like BIM, and not just software solutions. We're platinum partner with Autodesk and also part of the same umbrella group, Greytech, that AV Studios are as well.
Krátké představení společnosti Adris. Společnost byla založena v roce 1982. Je to jeden z největších dodavatelů konkurenčních softwarů v Velké Británii a tradičně v začátku se věnovala tady CAD softwaru, to znamená AutoCAD. V současné době se zaměřuje více na poskytování služeb spojených právě s technologiemi, jako je BIM, případně jako je digitální fungování v strojírenství a na konzultační služby. Adris je platinum partner Autodesku a je součástí Greytechu stejně jako Amazon.
As a company, Address has been involved in some bigger architects in England. So one of our biggest clients was Zaha, who you might have heard of, and sort of amongst those kind of people, we've sort of helped them roll out BIM and do all their kind of 3D modelling work. From a manufacturing side, for example, Kawasaki, we helped them produce a lot of their kind of components inside the kind of 3D modelling systems that they use. And now we're sort of working with companies like Schneider to basically kind of bridge the gap between manufacturing and kind of BIM. So helping them produce their components for manufacture, but also for architects and consultants and contractors to place them inside of buildings as well.
Adris spolupracuje s několika významnými architekty Velké Británie asi nejznámější je společnost Záhady, pomáhala rozjet a zavést technologii. Ve strojírenství je to potom například společnost Kawasaki a jeden z nových trendů je propojování technologií strojírenských a stavebních, například ve firmě Schneider, pro vás známý výrobce elektronických komponentů a těchto výrobců dochází přemostění mezi strojírenskou výrobní technologií a daty, které jsou potřebovány pro stavební projekt.
So in England, in the UK, the reason really that BIM was adopted and has been adopted very quickly in comparison to the sort of shift from, say, the drawing boards to 2D was mainly down to the government consensus, which in essence really this kind of sentence was really aimed to reduce the carbon footprint by 20% on all projects that the government was involved in. To enable that to happen, they encouraged the use of building information modelling technologies and kind of processes to help aid that kind of 20% reduction. And then also sort of working towards things like project life cycle as well. So.
Důvodem, proč BIM rychle se rozvinul z Velké Británii, tak je hlavně ze strany vlády, která vyhlásila strategii stavebnictví, na základě které je cílem zredukovat investiční náklady a zátěž pro životní prostředí o 20%. To je metoda pro dosažení tohoto cíle a který technologie information modeling. Proto
in the European Union, very recently the European Union has posted this Public Procurement Directive, which obviously the Czech Republic might end up getting involved in, which is really trying to encourage, again, along similar lines to what the UK has, basically the building information modelling as a kind of electronic tool and a kind of process to help produce and buildings and contracts. So it's really up to, obviously, as it says here, the member states of the EU to decide how they want to take that forward. But things like this obviously suggest the European Union are now sort of taking BIM quite seriously as a kind of tool.
Evropská unie se k tomuto postupu také připojila. V nedávné době vyšlo doporučení Evropské unie pro členské státy, aby v zakázkách, které jsou financované z peněz Evropské unie, členské státy požadovaly využít této technologie. V tuto chvíli je to doporučení Evropské unie, ale pravděpodobně v těch jednotlivých členských státech dojde legislativní změnám stejně tak jako v Velké Británii a například Francie už tu normu převzala a tento iniciativy se
So I suppose firstly, what is BIM? So I mean, everybody knows the acronym. Everybody's heard BIM as a term. I think that the problem is sometimes it's lost in translation as to what actually BIM means, and it also means a lot to different people. If you think of something like CAD, everybody uses CAD. Everybody knows what CAD is, but is the term CAD computer-aided design, drafting, detailing, drawing? And it's the same with building information modelling, which is probably how you tend to know BIM being referred to as. But is it building or buildings? Is it models or modelling? In respect, I tend to prefer to think of it as management. Everything inside of the building information model can be geometry, it can be drawn, but it also is data, it's information that's contained inside of it as well. And it's the management of that information really that's key, not necessarily the geometry that you're putting inside of it.
Takže BIM, všichni máme rádi zkratky, takže zkratka BIM, stejně tak jako zkratka CAD, nemá úplně jednoznačné vysvětlení nebo jednoznačný překlad. CAD může být Computer Aided Design, Drafting, Detailing, stejně tak BIM může vyjadřovat Building Information Model, Buildings Information Modeling, více modelů. KEAT preferuje použití výkladu této zkratky jako Building Information Management, protože metoda je založená nejenom na správě geometrie a grafických informací, ale na řízení rozsáhlejšího informací než pouze té geometrie.
And really this bit at the bottom was just referencing that in England and the UK we tend to start now moving towards what we refer to as PLM, which is sort of project lifecycle management, so taking a building from inception through to built construction and then FM as well. So as a whole thing, so sort of PLM rather than just building information modeling.
V Velké Británii se aktuálně usazují postupy nazývané PLM, Project Lifecycle Management, což je ještě širší pojem než BIM. Je to pojem, který zahrnuje také výstavbu a údržbu, to znamená facility management té budovy.
Acronyms aside, probably what we do know about building information modeling is roughly what it is. Digital prototyping, building information modeling as a sort of, you know, as it stands. Things like digital visualization, design visualization, and then virtual design construction as well. Virtual design construction is designing and building the building inside of a computer program first to enable testing for environmental, lighting, all of those sort of impacts before it's actually then constructed. Things like clash detection as well is a key part of why we would do virtual design rather than, you know, actual construction.
Kromě metodiky BIM samozřejmě používají i věci jako digital prototyping, což je postup ze strojírenství, vizualizace a v neposlední řadě virtual design construction, což je postup, který umožňuje tu budovu nejprve postavit počítači programu a vlastně otestovat jejich fungování, chování z hlediska energetické analýzy, z hlediska životního prostředí, z hlediska bezpečnosti. Zkrátka ta budova ještě předtím, než se začne realizovat, tak v podstatě není
So globally, really, what are the drivers for BIM, and why should we adopt BIM? Why should we do BIM? I mean, realistically, sort of urbanisation. So obviously, you know, the population's getting bigger, cities are getting bigger, housing stock is needed. You know, more buildings are being built. Natural resources are depleting, obviously, as we know. So buildings need to be greener. We need to recycle more, we need to be more efficient, energy saving. So buildings are becoming more complex, more detailed. Competition as well. I mean, in our sort of field, we work with companies who want to get an edge, want to get something ahead of their competitors. Building information modeling can sometimes do that. As I say, the complexity of buildings, so the components that go into buildings, everything's more detailed. Building information modeling helps organise that kind of data that we put now inside of buildings. And the technology that we use, obviously everybody loves new technology, and technology is moving very fast. And building information modeling is kind of part of that technology process.
Takže hlavní hnací silou celosvětově je samozřejmě urbanizace, lidé se přesouvají do měst, je potřeba posílit bytovou infrastrukturu, přírodní zdroje, tím více jsou využívány a samozřejmě snaha o jejich co nejefektivnější využití. Dále je to samozřejmě konkurence, protože stavebnictví je BIM považován také za konkurenční výhodu a něco navíc, co je možné poskytnout zákazníkovi. Dále komplexnost budov. Budovy obsahují stále více a více technologií, jsou stále detailnější, takže je potřeba samozřejmě tomu přizpůsobit design pracovní postup. A v poslední řadě je to potom technologie, která jde samozřejmě rychle dopředu, už je to hardware nebo software, což je další hnací silou.
As again, sort of globally, really, obviously just trends in the industry. Obviously things like commercial building stock going up, the amount of building stock that's being used and how that's growing globally obviously has a significant impact on you know, what we're building and how we're building it, and also the speed that we want buildings to be produced.
Je tady jenom několik dalších údajů celosvětových růstu výstavby v jednotlivých segmentech, například kanceláře, obchody a vzdělávání. Celosvětově výrazně větší růst než například stavy a transport.
In the UK, this was really just to emphasise sort of how BIM projects have been kind of adopted over the last few years. So obviously 2009 to sort of 2011, and then obviously projected for 2014. This also really highlighted the differences in the areas that BIM relates to. Architects, engineers were fairly quick to adopt BIM. Contractors are now kind of catching up. So the trend expected in the sort of 2014 projected bit is a lot steeper for contractors, because it's expected that they are now sort of catching up with where the architects and engineers are. They're seeing the benefits for BIM for them, particularly from a kind of life cycle management and facilities management handover side of things, where obviously the architects and engineers were more design and build based.
Takže tady je vidět rozšíření vstupu BIM ve Velké Británii po jednotlivých profesích nebo účastnících stavebního projektu. Ten graf ukazuje, kolik procent firem používá BIM na více než 60% jejich projektů a vlastně srovnání využití této technologie v letech 2009, 2011 a rok 2014 samozřejmě předpoklad ještě neskončil. Takže například v oblasti architektury v roce 2011 60% firm používalo metodiku a je předpoklad, že v letošním roce bude 70% firm. A největší růst mezi lety 2009 a 2014 je v oblasti stavebních firm. Stavební firmy jsou druhým největším po legislativě hnacím motorem Velké Británie.
The other shift really is a cultural thing with BIM, that historically everybody's used CAD, and CAD was always a documentation-led process. Everything in CAD led to you drawing sheets of information that then obviously fed into a kind of final design. The change really with BIM is that sort of process is almost reversed. And you now have a design, you have a model that's built in a computer programming, and then documentation is just a process of that. So the documentation isn't really as important as the actual building information model itself. Documentation is just one part of the information that's put inside it. The idea being that obviously information is handed to different consultants, and the different parts of that information are then hived off as required, rather than worrying about necessarily creating sheets all of the time for that information to be contained.
Že BIM je k tomu řadě změna, kulturní změna nebo změna vůbec myšlení, protože tradiční CAD kreslení znamená vlastně tvorbu jednotlivých výkresů a v rámci tvorby těch výkresů de facto vzniká ten samotný design. V procesu BIM je to obráceně, dokumentace a výkresy jsou vlastně jedním z výsledků, jedním z výstupů toho designu, toho modelu, toho myšlenkového procesu navrhování zastavby.
Part of that's big cultural change really as well for practices and consultants and people that we tend to deal with is the way that people work together. That cultural change we tend to sort of split into kind of three distinct areas. Obviously you've got the people inside of practice, the users of programs, the designers, the engineers. You've got the technology they use, obviously that's changing and developing. And then you've also got the processes that they work with inside of the practice and externally with other people as well. That could be seen as kind of being three distinct areas, and those areas being sort of as important as one another. Realistically they are, to a point, but in essence we tend to really see the processes as being the kind of important aspect. People obviously are important, and getting people's buy-in to something like a new program or a new process is important. But understanding that process that they already use and then adopting that process and altering it is really the most important thing. The technology, to a point, is secondary. There are different softwares out there. There's different hardwares out there. There's different infrastructure out there. That's a kind of secondary aspect to the people in the process, really, in the kind of cultural change of moving towards BIM.
Tradiční rozdělení nebo tradiční pohled je takový, že v tomto procesu je na stejné úrovni technologie, lidé a procesy, které jsou používané. To, co je potřeba změnit a to, k čemu dochází v rámci implementace BIMu, tak je, že technologie je vlastně pozadí až na druhém místě. Lidé jsou samozřejmě pořád stejně důležití.